And she did it with guts, she did it with grit, and she did it with a whole lot of stick it to them.
What? So it must be Groundhog Day or something. I'm honestly a little bit shocked, but for once, a semi-major figure of the Democrat Party establishment has actually just come out and pushed back against the far left. Kind of, sort of. I'm probably giving her a little bit too much credit with that statement, but let's talk about Gretchen Whitmer today, because we've been covering this whole Michigan Senate primary on the Democrat side, where you basically have the final boss battle of what we've described as the conflict between woke versus third world, which is to say, on one hand, you have a congresswoman by the name of Haley Stevens, and she is effectively the Democrat establishment's favorite in this race. And she basically represents a typical Democrat that you might imagine from, say, 2018 or 2020. Insane, crazy, woke white lady, has a crazy voice that talks like this and screams about COVID masks on the House floor and things like that. So that's the establishment pick, right? Crazy woke white lady versus what we have tongue-in-cheek kind of referred to as the Great Replacement, although there's a serious point to be made there, right? The Great Replacement's happening in the Democrat Party because she's losing currently to a guy by the name of Abdul El-Sayed, who, judging by the name, you probably can guess this guy is a Mamdani-style Islamic jihadi communist. He's basically running on the agenda of Palestine and abolishing the police and open borders and all of those types of things. And that's exactly what we've been raising, is that over time, as the Democrat Party continues to build its political coalition on the mass importation of third worlders to fill their ranks, it's only an inevitable trend that eventually you're first of all going to see things get radical and out of control, but more specifically, woke is going to be replaced by third world, which is to say that the general values of the Democrat Party are going to less resemble, say, 2010s Obama-era social justice warriors, and more so the violent, resentful politics of the countries where these people are coming from. And that is, for example, why, as you probably noticed this year, Pride marches have dwindled. Scott Wiener, of all people, is getting kicked out of his own Pride march. Why? Because it's being overshadowed now by Palestine activism. Is that exactly an accident? No, of course not. We know, for example, where the populations of these countries and what they actually care about. Let me say it's not the Pride March anymore. And so this is, of course, a trend you are noticing. Well, how does that relate to the Michigan Senate race and Gretchen Whitmer? It has thus far been the case that, as we've seen in many different Democrat primaries across this country, Abdul El-Sayed is leading in both the polls and the prediction markets, just given by recent trends, by the way, of how a lot of these primaries have been going, especially in the geographically northern areas of the United States. Seems very likely the jihadi communist is going to fulfill the Great Replacement and indeed beat the crazy woke white establishment lady. That is, of course, until today, although it's probably not going to make much of a difference. Gretchen Whitmer stepped in and is now endorsing Haley Stevens. She is basically the one major Democrat, and by the way, a future presidential contender. So she has a lot on the line here, right? But she's basically trying to intentionally make an enemy of the crazy far-left Palestine mob in order to try to save the Democrat establishment. Now, while we may be able to sit her and give her a little bit of credit, I guess, oh, she pushed back against the radicals, I would point out at the same time, it's definitely too little too late. Gretchen Whitmer, first of all, is definitely not Chuck Schumer or Hakeem Jeffries, and secondly, we have our serious doubts as to whether this will result in any different outcome in the election. It seems as if the writing's already on the wall. As a matter of fact, Gretchen Whitmer is only just going to make a bunch of enemies, and you likely just witnessed a key 2028 Democrat primary player for that presidential nomination probably just screwed herself over, if we're being honest. Nonetheless, though, let's talk about it. First, though, do us a favor. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. That is the best way to support our work, and it also ensures that you can stay up to date with all of the latest news and coverage. And with that said, Let's talk about the Democrat establishment's growing sense of panic. Hey, we got to do something, but Chuck and Hakeem don't want to step in and make a statement. Here, they apparently called the governor of Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer, to come in and say, hey, endorse Haley Stevens over El-Sayed. Take a listen.
As governor, I've had one strategy: get things done. And that strategy informs everything that I do. And that's why I'm endorsing Haley Stevens for the U.S. Senate. Just like me, Haley will do whatever it takes to get things done for the people of Michigan. Haley is as Michigan as it gets. She grew up in a middle-class household. Her parents ran a landscaping business out of their Ford F-150, and she'll tell anyone who will listen about her first Oldsmobile. She knows what Michigan families are going through, and that's how I know she will always put Michigan first. Join me in voting for Haley Stevens.
So first of all, I have to ask, is that a racist dog whistle, Gretchen Whitmer? What do you mean that Haley Stevens is as Michigan as it gets? Are you somehow trying to insinuate that Abdul El-Sayed is not a true Michigander? He doesn't have roots in the state. He's not someone who can really be described as being a part of the traditional Michigan culture. Hey, that's racist, Gretchen. You better watch your mouth, okay? You, how dare, are you saying that just because she's white? Huh? You're telling me that the Islamic migrants who showed up to Dearborn and completely transformed the place into Afghanistan? Hey, no, that's as Michigan as it gets. They're the new Michiganders are the real Michiganders. Don't be racist. Don't be racist, Gretchen. Anyways, that aside though, I also want you to notice what she didn't say. And why I stated in the beginning, maybe I'm honestly giving Gretchen a little bit more credit than she deserves here, because her whole case for why you should vote for Haley over Abdul is simply she believes in getting things done, which is to say that Abdul, because of the way he's likely going to govern, he's probably going to be a very ineffective senator. So she doesn't, of course, make the statement that his ideas are somehow wrong or need to be condemned. No. What the insinuation there is we generally like him. We agree with him. We just don't view it to be exactly all that pragmatic. We might lose the election, guys, if we vote for the jihadi communist, which also even then tells you a lot about the current state of the Democrat Party and how terrified, or maybe at the end of the day, just truly aligned the supposed establishment is with the communist radical rising base. And this is something we pointed out many times. In some ways, it's kayfabe. In some ways, the supposed struggle between the two sides is already fake. It's kayfabe to begin with, because at the end of the day, who's really in charge of the party? Who's controlling the strings? Sure, on paper, the establishment might have the positions of leadership, right? Chuck and Hakeem are the leaders of Congress, but who are they really answering to? Is it themselves as the establishment, or are they basically walking a tightrope and trying to do as much as possible to appease their radical base? And that is exactly the same thing here. She's basically saying, oh, we don't actually disagree with these people, but in the case, guys, we don't want to lose the election, right? And that's all that it's about. They don't care that Abdul is like insane and corrupt in many of his own ways and, supports, again, abolishing the police, abolishing ICE, all these things. No. It's just that it's not practical, right? He might be slightly unelectable for the state of Michigan, which, probably is quite telling in many ways. But that said, it is pretty interesting to watch because a lot of figures of the Democrat establishment are indeed trying to do the whole Graham Plattner game against El-Sayed. Not really working, if I'm going to be completely honest. And let's also be real. I mean, I think because Graham was white, that also didn't serve him. You know how this stuff goes. But apparently, they're also going on CNN and doing these media tours talking about how Abdul El-Sayed is sexist. Apparently, he said some bad things about women in the past. So you can't vote for a sexist, right? As they bring on this blonde, white, Democrat Congress lady to go out there and say that. To which I again respond, hey, have you forgotten, guys? This is not your party anymore, right? You're no longer the party of gay rights and feminism. That's all been phased out. You're the party of Palestine now, okay? So get with the program. But again, that's why I say it's really a battle of the old Democrat Party and the new Democrat Party. And by old, I don't mean JFK. I mean from a couple of years ago, because notice how coincidentally, it does seem to align with the Biden border situation, right? That's very interesting how different things have become in this party, and how, by the way, I mean, they've been insane. They were insane in the first administration, but notice how much more third world again they are nowadays, right? Nonetheless, though, here's what they're trying to now come up with to attack El-Sayed.
there is a uniquely sexist bent to the things that he has said about women, right? He said that Congresswoman Stevens couldn't string two sentences together, that she was sort of an empty vessel. When comparing her and her other female Democratic primary opponent, Mallory McMurrow, he said essentially there's no difference between the two candidates. One just has better comms and more charisma. It's one thing to attack your opponent because of the substance of their issues. It's another thing to engage in what are deeply sexist attacks. Going back to his race with Governor Whitmer, he said she was bought and sold for by her dad's company. Essentially comparing her to property with no ideas of her own. A successful two-term governor who many talk about as a potential presidential candidate. So that's what I meant by that. He's also had a number of former staff members who have come out against him, saying that they were mistreated by him and discriminated against in the workplace.
Yeah, so first of all, I think you can certainly see how desperate the Democrat establishment is, because really, we're actually doing this. I feel like I went in a time machine back to Hillary Clinton in 2016 again, right? If you disagree with her, it must just be because she's a woman. How dare you call out the fact that Haley Stevens is incompetent and can't string a sentence together, which, by the way, is true. Okay, that is something true that El-Sayed said, if you ever heard Haley Stevens speak. But, this is the whole game that they are playing. Oh, you think Gretchen Whitmer is corrupt? You called out a politician on something? Oh, well, that's just because she's a woman politician, right? Don't you know you're not allowed to criticize female politicians? To which I say, as ridiculous as that is, I'm not going to defend El-Sayed. Just sit back and let them fight each other, okay? However, to this congresswoman, you seem to have not gotten the memo. By the way, where is your burqa? Which is to say, have you missed what the Democrat Party is now? Who, ironically, the policies you support have imported not just into this country, but into your political coalition. Get with the program now. And by the way, how dare you Islamophobe, right? You Islamophobe. Are you saying that he has a problematic attitude towards women simply? I love just causing divide and stirring up, the S word, right? But are you trying to say that because he is a Muslim, he has a backwards view towards women? That's not very tolerant. Are you trying to call out the Islamic world for being fundamentally illiberal and actually kind of in contradiction, you would think, to woke social values? You're a bigot. Someone call Ben Affleck, okay? We need to call him and have him go debate Bill Maher over this, right? Again, I feel like I'm going back in time here, but that's the entire point, right? That's the entire point. So the old guard of the Democrat establishment is trying to pull out their old tricks, okay? They're going into the attic and trying to figure out, what did we do 10 years ago? How did we beat Bernie Sanders? It's a different world now, ladies and gentlemen. Your political coalition has a lot more El-Sayeds than it does Stevens these days. Let me just put it that way. So how do you think this is going to end for you? Not well. Do you think these attacks are going to land or stick? I don't exactly think so, but we'll see. We'll see. We'll find out. Regardless, what I would point out is that despite the attempts, for example, by Gretchen Whitmer to step in and help Haley Stevens, it does not appear to have made much of a difference. Granted, we don't have polling immediately because it just happened today, basically, so not exactly sure how this is going to be affecting things. But for example, when we look at the prediction markets over on Kalshi, you can just see El-Sayed has been a clear favorite for the past several weeks now. Got as high as an 87% chance to defeat Haley Stevens. Here's the Gretchen Whitmer endorsement earlier today. And you can see the size of this dip, right? It drops down to 67%, 65%. So, hey, it helped Haley Stevens for sure. But I'm still going to take a wild guess. I don't think it's really going to actually change the race, which is the point, right? It's kind of late for the Democrat establishment to step in and try to say something. And by the way, even when they do say something, even when you try to stand up to the radical left, it's not really a sincere, substantive thing. It's just, hey, we don't want to lose the election. To which I say, okay, in that case, as we have been arguing, the Democrat Party and the Democrat establishment absolutely deserves everything that they're getting right now. Because not only did they import these radicals, import these people, allow them into the tent, thinking, hey, you're going against Trump, Antifa, those things, so, keep doing your thing, and then now realizing they can't control those people, the mob is now coming for them as well. But even now, when the Democrat establishment is in full crisis mode, they're losing all these primaries. You can clearly see where things are trending. Most of the establishment figures are too scared to stand up and say anything. And then when Gretchen Whitmer, who, let's be honest, is not that important of a person, I understand, major governor, potential presidential contender, sure, that's all true, but still, she's a governor. She's not even a national politician, right? Even when she stands up and tries to say something, it's not even a serious rebuttal of these people. It's just a, hey, I'm going to kind of backhand you by endorsing the establishment person and trying to help them over the finish line. And then even then, notice how, by all accounts, it doesn't look like it's going to work, which is to say the cat's already out of the bag. It's too late for you. You're going to be consumed by the communist jihadi alliance. Might as well just accept that. Or at the very least, if that's not you, tell us that's not you. Have the moral courage to truly stand up and speak out against what's happening to your party. But with the exception of a rare John Fetterman, for example, that's obviously not happening remotely at all, right? They're just sitting there and taking it. So how are we supposed to feel bad for these people? We can't. They caused all of this to happen for themselves and enjoy the rise of the El-Sayed, you know? But anyways, that said, guys, let me know your thoughts on this in the comment section down below. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you are new. Until next time, God bless and peace.